Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Youth Talk, but today we're going to be talking about the unfair media attacks against Islam. Anyone who has watched TV or read the papers lately has seen a lot of accusations that are being made by certain Christian leaders in the West against Islam. And I want to investigate a little bit about who is behind it and what kind of things they're saying and why these things are really unfair and inaccurate. One thing I've noticed about these accusations is that none of them are new, but these are things that have been said about Islam for 1,400 years by people who have been fighting Islam, especially during the Middle Ages, and they've never come up with anything new. And none of them are based on true understanding of the historical circumstances behind the rise of Islam, but rather from distortions and from inauthentic material. But I'm sure the viewers and a lot of the youth here today have heard some of these, and I'd probably like to discuss some of them, the reasons behind this campaign. So I don't know if any of the brothers have some questions in this regard. Yes?
Yes, I've been hearing about certain people that have opinions that Allah is an evil God, and it's not the same God as the Christian God. And I just wonder, like,
yes, this is exactly what I was talking about. We've heard this now lately and for a while now, that Allah is the name of the Muslim God, and the Christians worship somebody called God. And Allah is violent or vengeful, and not the merciful and loving Christian God. And this is the exact example of the distortions which I'm talking about. First of all, the majority of the religious Christians in the West think, for example, that God was the name revealed to them in the Bible, and it's not. The Bible wasn't revealed in English or in French or German. It was revealed in the Hebrew and Aramaic languages that were spoken in the Middle East. And those languages in the Bible are only dialects of the original Arabic Semitic tongue, the same religion, the same tongue in which the Quran was revealed, in pure Arabic. And so the names of God in the Bible itself come from the same root, ilah, which means God or an object of worship. So Allah in the Quran is al-ilah, the God, the one true God. And in the Bible, the word Eloh is used, or Ilah is used. In the Middle East, to this day, Christians use the term Allah to refer to God, and they have no other word. And Christians in Egypt or Jordan or Syria have no other word for God except Allah. And so to them, Allah means the one God whom they worship, the same God that Muslims worship. There is a group of Christians living in Iraq called the Chaldeans. These are a small, ancient sect of the Christians who still speak the language which Jesus spoke 2,000 years ago, Aramaic. And they still worship in that language, and the word they use for God in their language, the Aramaic, is Allah, the same word which Muslims use. So the term Allah means the one God, the creator of the universe. Words in other European languages, like God, were simply translations from the Bible to the languages of those people. And so it's a distortion. The people who write this material know that it's not true. And this is a problem because they're scholars and they have studied religion and they've studied the language of the Bible, and they know very well that Islam doesn't teach any concept of God that is foreign to the concept that was taught by Jesus and Moses. Even in the Bible as they have it today, with the distortions and with the changes that have been made in it and the misinterpretations, still God is described with a way that the Quran describes much better and much more accurately, but it's describing the creator of the universe. The God of the Quran created the whole universe and all peoples and all tribes and loves them, and through his mercy sent prophets and messengers to guide them. Never in any time does the Quran say that this God is the God of the Arabs, or this is the God of a particular race or group. Unlike the Bible, in which many times it's ethnocentric. It's focused on only the events which happen to one particular tribe in history. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, Allah, is significant. It's full of meaning, the God, the true object of worship. And no one in the world, no matter what their religion, could object to this term. And so Allah is the real name for the divinity that created this entire universe. And there's no reason whatsoever for this campaign, except that people are afraid that their own followers, their own Christian followers, will listen to the Muslims and take the true concept of Tawheed, of the unity of Allah, of monotheism, from the Muslims, because Christians in the West don't understand the Trinity and the concepts which are taught to them by the priests. And so they say, well, we don't see this concept of God in the Bible that's being taught. And so they hear the Muslims and say, yes, the God that the Muslims are talking about is the God that we believe in. And that's why they're embracing Islam. And this scares a lot of the Christian fundamentalist leaders who are purposely distorting Islam. Any other attacks that you may be familiar with? Yes.
Yes, I'm Omar Khashaba, and I've heard attacks against the Prophet ﷺ. He's been accused of things varying from being a womanizer to being a terrorist. And I really can't understand these accusations.
Unfortunately, this campaign was started recently. There's, of course, political reasons behind this campaign that we have to understand. But they have attacked the person of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Muslims can't understand this because Muslims are taught to venerate all the prophets of God. And even in the Quran, we're forbidden to curse the idols of those kuffar, because in the kuffar, the unbelievers will, out of their ignorance, curse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're supposed to venerate the prophets and messengers, and even respect people of different religions whose opinions in our religion are wrong. But these attacks against the Prophet are copies of attacks that were made in the Middle Ages. And you know, some of those examples of the attacks that they're saying is that he was a violent person. For example, in the Bible itself, some of the prophets were engaged in warfare. Some of the prophets had to defend their countries. Or, for example, when the tribe of Israel was sent to Palestine by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were given the teachings of jihad. But then, of course, many of them refused to follow it. But their prophets taught them to fight for the sake of their religion. And some prophets came in times and circumstances where they had few followers, they were persecuted, and they were not able to defend themselves. And so those prophets did not teach their followers jihad. So, for example, in the time of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, as he's known in Arabic, the Christians were a small group of followers of Jesus living among a very dangerous Roman Empire, and they were attacked not only by the Roman pagans, but by the Jewish leaders and rabbis. And so they had to be quiet, keep their religion secretly, and try to live in peace with their neighbors as much as possible because they couldn't defend themselves. The same thing happened in Islam. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sent to Mecca when he was 40 years of age. He received the Quran, and he had a small amount of followers who believed in him. They were greatly persecuted. And so they were very patient. Sometimes they were killed. Sometimes they were tortured. But they didn't even defend themselves. They were very patient until they could find a firm place to establish Islam. They established it in Medina. And then they were able to defend themselves. And so Islam teaches that in each circumstance, there are legitimate and moral, ethical responses as a Muslim. And so when Muslims are able to defend themselves, they do so. And there's nothing wrong with that. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was a lover of peace, and so were all the Muslims. But when necessary, they put their lives on the line and were able to defend themselves. So the Prophet Muhammad gives us, in his personality, the best example for all kinds of different circumstances, for war and peace, as a family man, as a businessman, as a leader of government. In every circumstance, we have examples from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So, of course, the Prophet Muhammad participated in these wars. Did he try to become a king or ruler and gather wealth and build palaces for himself? No. Only tried to establish justice and high ethical and moral society in Arabia, and he was successful. So the Prophet Muhammad's life was a great miracle. No historical person before or since has ever been able in their lifetime to change a whole nation like Arabia from the lowest barbarity and ignorance to being of the highest ethical and moral standards. So the Arabs and the Muslim followers became for 1,000 years the leaders of mankind in science, in religion, in all matters of civilization, because in his lifetime he was able to do what nobody before or since has ever been able to do, change a whole nation. Moses himself was not able to change his people. They were too stubborn to change in his lifetime. Jesus was not able to change his people. But Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was able to successfully put the religion of Islam as an actual model that till this day we can look at the model in actual life, the practical example that we need for our lives. So the Prophet Muhammad is a great model and will be for all time. He's a universal figure. We know more historically about the Prophet Muhammad's life than any other figure of the past. And there's nothing about his life which is scandalous or corrupt, but it was always an example of the best of humanity. And he is a human being whom we respect. But he is a human being, and he lived a life like every other human being. And that's why we can look to him as our example. We are going to be discussing these unfair media attacks against Islam after this break. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to Youth Talk. Any other kinds of attacks that you may have heard, or any other kind of things? Yes, sir.
No, I have a question. Like when there are these attacks, like a lot of people in the West negatively insult or criticize our religion, which is Islam, and I criticize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I was just wondering, what's the best way to reply the best way, and at the same time we don't give them a bad image of Islam.
And this is a very important question because the Quran tells us all the time that we have to respond with them in the best way, bilatihi ahsan, in the best response for the circumstances. So the Muslim looks to the circumstances. Most times when people say things about Islam, it's because they don't have the correct information. They've been given misinformation from other people. So very often sincere people will say things against Islam which are shocking and wrong, but we shouldn't get offended. We should look to change that person's opinion. So the Muslim has to choose the best way and effective way of responding. And of course, one important thing is our attitude. Our attitude has to be that we have mercy in our hearts, compassion for people who have been misled and given the wrong information, and in a friendly way we can respond to those things. And so even if somebody says something that really breaks your heart to hear about Allah, like we heard, or about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, you can respond to that in the way which is best and say, no, my friend, your information is wrong, and these are the facts. I'm not basing my information on my own opinion, but there are sources to which you can refer if you like. Because the reason that Islam was sent to this world is as mercy and guidance for all of humanity. And so if Allah could guide one person to Islam by you, it's a great honor and blessing to you. And so you should want to change that person's concept And the best way of changing it, of course, is to be a friendly and open person and be a source of good information. If the person who is attacking is distorting Islam on purpose, sometimes you have to be a little bit harsh in your response. For example, a Christian minister who has studied and knows for a fact that the information he's supplying is not correct, you have the right then to respond and say, no, you are distorting this information. You have to show people that, no, this person is not sincere. Because most of his followers, for example, think that, oh, this is a sincere man of God, and he is teaching us the truth. But he is purposely distorting our religion because he's afraid of his religion losing ground. He's afraid that if people have correct information about Islam, about the Prophet, about Allah, that they will be led to become Muslims. And you know, a lot of those people depend, they make huge amounts of money. Many of them are multi-millionaires. Especially this recent media campaign has been led by extremely corrupt people who've used their religion to become multi-millionaires. And all their money is tax-free in the West because it's done for the sake of religion, in the name of religion. And so when they're afraid they're losing members, then you can bet that they're going to use any means. So with those people, you have to be a little bit firm so that people will lose confidence in their teachings. So Islam requires, as Muslims, that people who are nonviolent should be responded to in the best means possible. People who are not attacking us with violence should be responded with nonviolence and in all the best means that we have at our disposal. Islam is the religion of reason, that we invite all of mankind to look in the Quran and look in the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad and use their minds and pray for them that Allah will guide them and all of us to the truth. Any more questions in this regard?
We know now about the media and how it's trying to distort the image of Islam in the eyes of the West, and I want to know the real picture from you, as you have lived in the West before, and you know the real picture of Islam and how people in the West look at Islam and know Islam. So I don't want to get this information from the media, and I want to know about it from you firsthand.
There is a media campaign, or there are media attacks. There are Christian fundamentalist leaders. All of them have their own agenda. Do they speak for all the people of the West, for America in particular? And I can tell you from experience, they don't. A lot of their attacks are based on their own fears about the spread of Islam. Now, let me tell you something about the Islamic da'wah in the West. In my lifetime, not very long ago, there were probably half as many Muslims there as there are now. I'm not an old person. But when I was 20 years ago, when I was a new Muslim, 20 years ago, there weren't mosques in most of the cities of America. Or if there were a mosque, it would probably be some small storefront, some small little rented facility. There were few Muslims. Most Muslims were foreigners. And so I didn't know any Muslims, never met any Muslims in my life before I was perhaps 17 or 18 years old. Today it's different. Islam is spreading. People, even after all the events of recent history and all the false accusations against Islam, people want to know. I heard a statistic that the #1 term that is being searched for in the internet these days is Islam. More people put in Islam in the search engines than any other single word. They're looking for information about Islam. And we know that as long as there is a war of information, Islam is going to win that war. As long as people have information, Islam is going to prevail, because Islam stands for the truth and can be understood by human reason. The people who are attacking Islam are a minority. In America themselves, the Christian fundamentalist leaders have been discredited. A lot of them have broken the teachings of their religion openly and have been openly caught, for example, using prostitution, and have been jailed for embezzling the funds of their churches and their organizations. So the majority of people have rejected them, even though they still stand for, they have a large group of followers, many millions of followers. They are a minority in their own country. Culture of the West is now in a stage which they themselves admit is the post-Christian stage. If it at one time had been Christian, today the majority of people are not Christian in their beliefs. There was a Gallup poll taken a few years back in which a large number of people were asked about their beliefs in Jesus Christ. And a lot of people in that poll said that Jesus was a prophet or a messenger. They didn't believe he was God or divine. And then when they asked people who believed Jesus was divine, what does his divinity mean? They said that his divinity, a lot of people said his divinity was that he was rightly guided by God and he was a good example of the divine teachings. So if you put those people who define divinity like that with the people who rejected his divinity, they were the majority, more than 50% in a Christian country, a majority Christian country, and they believed the same concept of Jesus that Muslims believe. So my experience is that people overall are fair and they're willing to listen and understand the truth, and they're waiting for people to give them information. And we have to present it to them, though, explain it to them in a way that they can understand and can accept. And so that's our job, really, in this world. A lot of Muslims are complaining. They say, well, the Christian media, the Jewish media, they're distorting Islam. Well, you know, it's not the job of the Christians and the Jews to teach people about Islam. It's our job. And so they're able to distort the image of Islam because we're not doing a good job of projecting that image. One, they're making a lot of sacrifices, donating billions of dollars of their own private money to spread their message. We're not doing it. If you go to the poorest villages of Africa, you will find Christians from Europe and America who left behind their comfortable homes, and they're in those poor countries teaching people about their religion. Some of them don't even teach them about their religion. They only deal in helping the sick and the poor for the sake of their religion. And yet, many Muslims are neglecting this. So we have to look at that. There's one particular accusation which I wanted to confront before this program ends, and that is the idea that Islam is somehow anti-Semitic. And this is an amazing term that Islam, every Muslim, no matter what their race, we venerate the word of Allah in the Quran in the original Semitic Arabic. And of course, many Muslims are Semitic themselves. They're from original Arab tribes who are a Semitic race, or many Muslims were former Jews who also converted to Islam from the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. There have been many people from the tribe of Israel who have converted to Islam. Until this day, they are. How could they be anti-Semitic? This is a term which simply means, oh, you're against Israel and the oppression that the Israelis are committing against Muslims. And so they're trying to say that we could be anti-Semitic. Islam is not anti any race or group. The Muslims are not against Jews or Europeans or black people or white people, but the Quran says that Allah guided and wants to guide all of the nations of every religion, of every race to this religion. And at no time in history has any Islamic state or Muslim state been set up based on race as a criterion, that you have citizenship and you have full rights because you are one race or another. That's never happened under Islam. The Jews lived in their golden era under the rule of Islam in Islamic Spain. And so Islam is not anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish. It's a campaign against Islam to distort the image of Islam. And the people behind that campaign know very well the reality, but they're trying to mislead people. And many times in history, the Jews have had to go to Muslim countries to seek protection, and the Muslims have opened their doors. So this campaign against Islam has been going on, has ulterior motives. It's because people are afraid of knowledge. They're afraid of the facts. And Islam has the facts. Islam has the answers for people. Hopefully we'll see you in another episode of Youth Talk. وجزاكم الله خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.